Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with a couple nerds.
Hey, I'm Ryan.
I'm Ted.
Today we want to do a D&D do's and don'ts, and we're going to be talking about roll and roll.
Roll versus roll.
Roll versus roll.
So do you want to define that so that, everybody out there knows what we're talking about?
Sure. When we're talking about roll, in this case, we're talking about rolling the dice and role-playing at the table, and when to do either or those, and what's appropriate and when's inappropriate when they're done right.
Yeah. So, I kind of brought this up, is that it always bothers me when, players arbitrarily decide to roll before the GM ever calls for the roll. It's just like, the GM's going to be like...
Before we continue the discussion, down in the description below, there's the link for the newsletter. Why don't you guys go click that and sign up so you get Nerdarchy exclusives and learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
Okay, as I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted.
Good.
So, it always bothers me when players are just, rolling dice. Why'd you roll... What'd you roll the dice for? I as the GM, I didn't call for you. Basically, I'm going to tell you when I feel like the thing that you're trying to do is challenging enough that I'm going to make you roll a die for it. It's just people add these arbitrary dice rolls, and we're just playing the game until we get to this point.
If there's a role-playing going on during the game, there's really no reason to grab the dice unless the DM says, give me a diplomacy or persuasion or intimidation roll or whatever, for the subject. But if you're just going through and you're RPing, unless the DM stops you, there's no real reason to stop.
Yeah. Right. Or also, you could use the roll as sort of like an improv technique. So this gets back to the argument of character resource allocation that Ted and I have had. Basically, all social skills are bullshit if you never actually do roll on them, because you could, if you're a person that's just got a charming personality or can talk your way out of the situations, you could put an 8 in the stat and not ever take any of the social skills and just literally talk your way through them.
But that wouldn't really be role-playing. You're not role-playing your stats.
No, yeah, you aren't. But
you're metagaming,
yeah,
essentially.
You're metagaming with the talk through, and oh well, I guess his talking was good enough, but I've never, you're not, at that point the GM kind of has to step in and well, you're doing this really socially viable stuff very well, but when I look at your character, you've spent not a single character resource to be good at it. So why?
Yeah, you're not capable of that.
Yeah, So it sucks because it is a little, almost feels like a heavy-handed GMing in that regard.
Well, I mean, there's times where that particular scenario is okay. Well, if the GM thinks that kind of thing should work in that situation, then it's fine. If it becomes a habit of the character, then you'd say, no, I don't think you're
not role playing your character,
right?
Your mechanical,
your shortcomings, your mechanical shortcomings, is kind of the thing. If you put your absolute lowest stat in charisma, you shouldn't be giving rousing speeches all the time.
Well, and that just brings us back to that's a role playing don't. If you're basically glossing over those social skills when it comes to the mechanics side of the game, but then you're RPing like a rock star above where you would be.
Yeah.
Because you can role play well and dumb down stuff. It might be actually harder for you to role play your character as maybe being socially awkward or mentally handicapped. They're all role playing.
And I've done exactly that situation. If you remember, the evil game that you ran in the orc area. We were all playing, orcs and half orcs, so a lot of our mentals, weren't all that great. And I literally had 8 or 9 was my highest of mental stats. My charisma was a 6 because we were playing, I think it was 2nd edition or whatnot when orcs had some heavy negatives, and it was okay, no, it was 3rd, but I was the party leader, and the campaign would not have continued without somebody stepping in and doing stuff. And I didn't dumb myself down. I didn't make stupid calls, and I really should have. You know, it's something that I've learned.
You should have forced the rest of the party, like, we can't let him actually make any of the calls. Like,
Yeah,
he's really good at swinging that axe or that sword, but all these judgment call things, what the hell are we thinking? Yeah, no, yeah, so, yeah, that's kind of like, yeah, it could have been done better.
When it comes to the dice, the only time you should be doing a do is, like, if you have knowledge skills and you're like, hey, do I have a chance to know this? Yeah. Or know something about this? Can I make a knowledge check?
Yeah, but you use the words before you use the action. You know, do you want me to roll this or can I roll this? Don't just grab a die and roll it for no reason. You know, and then say, hey, I've got a such and such. Does it help?
Yeah, because you can arbitrarily roll dice all night. Like, I mean, yeah.
I fiddle with dice all the time. It's just, you know, I like dice, so I roll all the time. But like, I always try to, you know, I always get, you know, hey, I'm making a specific roll now. You know, this is what I got.
Scott's pretty good for that. Like, hey, I have this? Can I make a check?
Well, Scott is very, you know, dice heavy. He likes the dice to figure things out.
Yeah, but he doesn't. But what I'm saying is, he always asks. He gets the permission.
Correct.
Before he does it. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's kind of the thing.
It's like the idea of, like, if your character's going to climb a ladder, you're not going to make a check to climb a
Yeah, do I need to roll for that?
Yeah,
no.
like kind of common sense. Like, you know, only when you're doing, like, difficult or epic shit should you be, like, you're in combat, or, like, you know, or maybe you are trying to recall an obscure tale or history of something. But, yeah, so otherwise, like, just don't roll the dice unless your GM, like, wants or needs. And, like, you know, like, if you feel like that there is something super important, like, yeah, hey, can I roll on this real quick?
And when it comes to, like, all those social skills, don't say, oh, well, can I convince him? How are you going to convince
Well, no, I think a good thing is, you know, again, if you spend allocated resources, or you don't, or you want to, like, have an idea of how well you do it, like, maybe you roll the dice and then, like, that's your character's read on the situation, and, you know, then you RP, like, if you roll a 15 or whatever, like, that's a substantially good roll, and if you're trained in it or whatever,
well,
you know, so, like, it's the idea of, like, playing that rousing speech when the dice inform you of it, or if you roll a 1, you say the absolute, like, worst possible thing.
That's where our DMing styles are different.
See, it really depends on the players involved and the DMs involved, and that you guys know each other well enough to know which route to go. You know, otherwise you might be putting the horse before the cart, or the other way around, putting the cart before the horse. So that's just a matter of play style.
Well, it's the same thing of, like, why you don't describe, like, this epic attack or whatever when you actually missed, you know, like, yeah, like, oh, I hit him and I stabbed his freaking eye out and stuff. Well, you didn't even actually make contact. So, you know, like, or you rolled the absolute worst you could possibly roll in the dice. Like, that's so if you're gonna have some of the G of the role play game present at your table, that's a player discussion, player GM discussion of how much of the game is present at the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it comes down to play styles. So for RPing dues, you know, go with the RPing until your DM tells you
like,
otherwise.
Whoa, yeah, until he puts the brakes on.
You know,
or she.
Yeah. You know, rolling dues is, you know, basically asking permission if it's something that you want to make a check to know that you have a skill to use, but
I mean, technically anybody can you know can make any kind of knowledge checks, but, you know, like, those characters, like, say if they have an expertise in it or you're trained in it, like, absolutely that character should be trying to use those character resources, because that's what you spent your points on.
I feel it's more relevant though to someone actually just trained in it, because they've actually, you know, they've actually that character has actually spent time learning the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to the player going, hey, can I make a random roll to maybe know something and pull something out of my ass?
Yeah.
You know, well, because that gets you know what
the problem with it is, like, it almost steps on the toes of the character that actually did spend the resources. It's like, I spent, like, X amount, like, you get, like, maybe 4 skill proficiencies or whatever, and you spend a quarter of those resources or half those resources on knowledge.
You know, what you can do in that situation, you know, if the player who, you know, has got all those resources allocated toward that particular knowledge, you know,
and DC for them.
You could lower the DC for them, you know, or, you know, if they totally bomb the roll and the player who, didn't
Dumb luck, they roll a 15
that
plus.
happens to roll a high number, you know, he might not know what they're talking about, but you could be like, you know, dude, doesn't this have something to do with blue flowers? And he just says something that doesn't make sense at all.
Well, here's the...
But it triggers a memory, and you give that to the player who can then shed light on the situation because they've got the resources.
Well, when you talk in terms of the help action, like anybody can help, and then once they get the help action, that character with the knowledge skill gets advantage on the roll.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could, like, yeah, like this person's kind of just mumbling about random stuff about, like, blue orchids. Like, oh, I remember exactly the Nightingale Forest. Yeah.
So, don'ts. We talked about some do's, the don'ts. You know, like we said, don't interrupt the scene to, you know, basically
roll a die.
Roll a die unless your DM wants you to. And
yeah, don't reach for the die, you know, without a justified reason or without, you know, getting permission first.
Dice consent. It's all about dice consent.
Yeah, keep the game moving smoothly. So you guys, let us know in the comments below what you think. What are your roll RPing and rolling do's and don'ts,
or etiquette,
or etiquette. And while you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can check us out over on Instagram,
or you can check out funny memes over on Facebook.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.